From WLWT, this is Let's Talk Cincy, presented by Western and Southern Financial Group. Put our financial strength behind you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Curtis Fuller, and welcome to Let's Talk Cincy. Today, a conversation with two of Cincinnati's top leaders. First, City Manager Cheryl Long, who oversees more than 6,000 employees. Next, Fire Chief Frank McKinley. He leads the oldest fully paid professional fire department in the nation. There's a lot to unpack in this half hour. First, crime that's dominating the headlines. I asked the manager about the city's response to this problem that hits home for her.
Well, what we wanted to make sure is that the city got out there and make sure that they heard our voice in a very succinct and organized manner to let them know that we understand that there's a feeling of people feel that we're not being as responsive. But what we wanted you to know about the things that we are continuously working on and adding to already things that we've put in place to make sure we're improving the perception of what they feel is unsafe. We announced our drone program that we've already been deploying in certain instances throughout the city, the expansion of what that's going to look like. We announced we've already been working on for the last 8 months a lateral class to help with continue to the commitment of putting new officers on the street. This would allow us to recruit from outside the city. Again, these are things that are not just been happening. We've been working on them, but we wanted to let people know what that was. And we also announced a task force of officers that are seasoned, that would not affect the response in which how people are showing up in your neighborhood, but are people that we are going to be moving over to OTR in some of the hotspot areas to make sure that they are paying attention to the spots that people are concerned of. At the end of the day, I know people don't want to hear, but we are seeing our crime overall is under decline. But in the same sense, we do understand that there is the violent crime and situations that are happening that might be that is a little bit increased. And the city is listening to you. We do not dismiss the feeling. We are continuously problem solving to make sure that those tools are being deployed and that the city hall is giving police what they need. But what I want to make sure, Curtis, that people understand is it's not just a policing response. The city over the last 3+ years has been really committed to letting people, coming out of COVID, we knew that mental health was an issue, so we had ARC. The following year, we increased ARC that showed up, alternate response, so that we have mental health that's deployed. We also have 311, which is our community responders that helped out with the Government Square incidents. And then we have Iris Rowley, who has her collaborative agreement community cares initiative that is also an extension of 311. And then also what we have consistently committed to is the funding of police classes. And then we have an Act for Cincy. So these are all things that are giving community an opportunity to be engaged and be at the seat of the table. And also we want to make sure that people understand that parents, we need the help of parents, because what we are seeing is young people being in situations that they should not be in, that could be a problem, right? Could affect their ability to grow and be mature, young, functioning, and responsible adults. And what we're seeing is they're being unsupervised in the city. And so we're asking for help. We really need parental responsibility. And I think that was pretty much the theme of what we're seeing. Now, there are a lot of good kids that are out there. The city has also added a bunch of city planning, like from Rec at Night. We have Hirsch Rec Center. In addition to that, we have Lincoln Rec Center that are on the weekends on Saturday. You can go and it's a safe place for you to enjoy. And then what we also noticed was that youth were going to Smale Park. So we said, we want to make sure that they have something to do. So we added staffing for that. So there is a place for you to go and you can skate at Smale. There's a DJ. If you don't want to skate, you can hang out and just dance. So there is programmable places for you if you don't have the resources. The city is here and all 23 pools are open. So please use that time to spend quality time with your young adults. We need your help. We are here to provide those things for you to do, but we can't force you to walk through the door. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
It must be frustrating. I would imagine that you get that call when things occur and you think, wow, we're trying to resolve this, but you get that call and you know what's coming in the headlines, you know that it's going to be the breaking news story, and then trying to counter that. I would imagine it's frustrating.
It is very frustrating. I mean, this administration, this city hall, we are 24/7 trying to problem solve and making sure that when people say they need it, we provide it. And I know without a doubt that we have done that. I think what is most frustrating for me is when people say you haven't done enough. Because that's every single day that we come into City Hall, the mayor, myself, I mean, on weekends, we're talking to each other as we're seeing things happening. What is enough? You know, what else can we add? What else can we add without being knee-jerk? Because that's also important. We utilize the data, and the data paints this picture. And although at the end of the day, your safety is your sense of how I feel safe versus how you feel safe, maybe two things. But we're looking at the data, and that tells us how to deploy and where we need to go. And that's what we will continue. We don't want to be knee-jerk, because when you do that, just because of what people are saying, then that throws off all the institutional things that we've been working on. But in the same sense, when you have people that are doubting that you care, I'm born and raised in Cincinnati. This is my hometown. So if at the end, and there's a lot of us that are like that as well, we're going to do what we can to make sure that while we're here, we're doing everything that's needed. And I think that's the frustrating when people try to take away that work of all these 6,000 employees and say that you're not doing enough. I would beg to differ, and I can we are doing everything that we can do.
My final question on this topic, and I was reminded, Pastor Jackie Jackson, his grandson was killed a year ago, and I think it's still an unsolved crime. And that must be troubling as well, because you're trying to stop some, but you're still trying to solve some. And you've talked about your own personal unfortunate tie to the situation. So what do you say to those folks in terms of the work being done to try to solve these?
You know, at the end of the day, the way that I said it, what I've told myself is, since my sister's passing, was I want to spend every single day making sure if there is a need that I'm utilizing my seat at the table to fulfill that need. And so what I would tell people, and what I have done recently when I had to speak at an event Karen Rumsey was holding of people who, I was a keynote for people who had lost people to gun violence. And I think it's important for people to understand how do you use that energy and how positive you're using that energy. There's a way of stopping conversation very quickly to act out of anger, and there's a way of continuing a conversation by acting out of grace. And I think what I would tell people is, be careful. If there's a moment where all of us need to take a moment for self to be able to work that out, but then there's a time when we need to activate, and we need to get the right people around the table to have productive conversations. At the end of the day, the way that we are at the city, the guns that are in this street, and people want to minimize and say there's nothing we can do about it. But I would argue there's always something you can do about it. Enough voices is how City Hall is reacted, and that's how we move things, right? And so what I would say is that there's always something you can do. Just make sure you're doing it with a sense of grace, and having that conversation and getting the right people around the table to be the positive change and not shutting down the potential change. That's what I would say.
Two years. It's coming up on 2 years. It seems like yesterday. I remember it vividly when it was announced, and when you had the big welcome. Family came up from Dallas. How has it been? I know you've gotten adjusted to the city. Talk a little bit about your 2 years.
Yes, and it's been very incredible having the opportunity to get out there and talk to the members and understand, being able to build conduits of communication. And we've done a lot of things in this nearly 2 years, and it's been impressive. And some of it had its pain points and things to try to find out how we can make the department better. And I always want to be clear, we have an incredible department. But we continue to strive and get support from the city manager's office to make sure that our members have what they need to be successful. And the support that we get from the leadership of the city has just been incredibly impressive.
You have this recruit class, the latest recruit class, graduates in July.
Well, again, it's a testament to the city's commitment on giving the fire department what we need. And there's been a strong will to be able to make sure we're properly staffed. That was a concern initially coming in, and we're making progress in those areas. And now we're starting to look at some different things as we build our strategic action plan and how we move forward. But again, it's very difficult when you don't have the support. And again, having the support from the city manager's office, from city leadership, the councilman, everybody's been supportive. And I really think that we're doing big things in the fire department. We're making incredible strides on a lot of the things that we do.
And I think also too, what was very important for me, and what I'm very happy with Chief coming in the reason why I wanted to, he was my pick, was also because I saw this level of making sure that he is ushering in a culture change in our fire department. We get firefighters when they're 18 years old. Think about it. 18 years old is what we are attracting. And in the same sense, we have a cadet program that we're trying to feed them in so that we want to make sure that we're able to fill every one of those classes. But one thing that Chief came in is he's made sure, he's like, we need executive training. We need to make sure that we are preparing everybody from the bench to be ready to step into those additional promotions. It's not about just being on a list and being ready. We need everyone to be ready.
You talked about training. The one thing now, when firefighters show up on the scene, it's different than it would have been, let's say, maybe 30 years ago. There are dangers that exist outside of what may be taking place in a house that you respond to. How do you address that challenge?
Well, first of all, thanks for that question. And one of the things that we try to do is be proactive. I reach out to a lot of my counterparts throughout the country and try to find how we can continue to advance the department. Like, we have paramedics and EMTs in our program, and so we incorporate that type of treatment for the patients that they run on. And so being able to get equipment and train on different pieces of equipment, understanding the advancement in emergency medicine is incredibly important, because that's pretty much 85 to 90% of the calls that we make. And so being able to pivot and adjust to the needs of the city is very important. And so having the opportunity to develop professionally, to talk to the counterparts and things like that, to bring things and different ways of thinking to the city has been incredibly beneficial.
To the extent that you can, talk about the conversation of how the fire department plays in security, keeping everybody safe even during those large events.
Yes. A lot of times what we do is we activate the EOC, especially when we have multiple events or large-scale events going on, where we have an incident action plan or action plan that really communicates and bridges those gaps between police, fire, other city departments, and things of that nature. And so one of the things I think that we've done a very good job of is communicating. It's one thing to have that information, it's a whole different thing to be able to disseminate that. And I think that it's really important to bring people, not just when we have these events, but before those events, how we develop professionally, what are the needs, and understanding those things. So being able to activate the EOC, which lies under the fire department, is incredibly important. And so we want to make sure that we're proactive in any event that's going on in the city, so we can make sure that the public is safe.
And what I would tell you is people are very impressed with what City of Cincinnati is. About a year ago, I think maybe, I hosted the Large Cities Executive Forum here. And we had over 40 plus city managers from across the country that came in, and some for the very first time, and that was during Blink, to see what City of Cincinnati was doing. And I will tell you, since then, they were very impressed. They were like, this looks like New York. Down to the Times Square. They were impressed with our police department, the ability for us to deploy something so massive, and many of them said they have never seen so many people in one place going on, and how happy people were. They were also very impressed with how we were able to take art and basically make it bring it to life the way we did, because many of them have art as a revenue source that they're putting into their budget, but they don't know how to activate it in a way that is intentional and that brings people to buy in and see how they too can see themselves in art. And so when I tell you that was a huge showing that we had during that, and actually our old city manager, Patrick DePaney, came for a couple of days. They were super impressed. So what I would tell you is right now, with the leadership that I have, City of Cincinnati, and regardless, City of Cincinnati has a great history. Many people and a lot of the past city managers, I've been able to meet with them who, when they leave City of Cincinnati, they have a special place in their heart for it and want to make sure it's in good hands. And I think they're very impressed with what's going on now.
Same with you.
It's a very well-respected department, nationwide. And so being able to reach out to some of my counterparts, I think that getting feedback from them, what do they think? We've had events that have happened in the city, and I say, hey, how was this handled? And so, being able to get that feedback, that honest feedback, the fire chief from Las Vegas, the fire chief from Orlando, the fire chief from Arlington, Texas, the fire chief from the new fire chief in Dallas, Texas, the fire chief from Victoria, Texas, the fire chief from, all of us worked on the executive team together. So I do have some resources out there to say, hey, give me some feedback. Give me some feedback. And that's one of the things too that's real important to me, being able to grow, understand that. And so being able to get feedback, I've been provided feedback from the city manager, and that's something that's so important, being able to have that opportunity to grow and develop. So the department is very well respected.
The national climate that's taking place, we're seeing all types of things going on. How does that impact the day-to-day life in Cincinnati?
I mean, I would argue if you go to public comment during our council meetings, things that our council members have to hear about that they do not have control of, I could say that there's a funnel of people who feel like City Hall is a place for them to be able to express their frustrations. We are continuously looking at with police and staying in contact to see if there's anything that might be activating from a public safety standpoint, whether it's protests that is happening. But as you've seen, City of Cincinnati has done very well with understanding that people's ability and they have the right to protest. And people have done that in a peaceful manner, and then they have gone about their day, right? So I would say that because we are a large city, and City Hall is the most, I would probably argue one of the most accessible city halls that there is in the region. We do get people who are very frustrated with what is going on across the country and what's going on in their federal government. And our council members have done a great job navigating. We also have to prepare because honestly, our budget depends on federal. We've done a great job really diversifying our revenues by using federal government in that, and the potential of what could be happening that could affect our local dollars. And in our budget, while we were able to deliver a balanced budget, we know also that the things that we have done to be fiscally responsible could maybe have to be pivoted depending on what happens with the cuts that are happening at that level. And so that is something that once that does go through, while we may have money to divert things around, we still then in the future could, depending on how long that lasts, would have to cut back. That is what people are going to feel locally. So in the same sense, I would say that we're just trying to prepare internally. So if that does happen, and while we don't see nothing, we know people in their home is probably frustrated. It could eventually affect what happens out front in front of your house, and we will have to be ready to deal with that, and then people may be even more frustrated from that.
My final question is to the future. As you look forward, anything that you would like to see to move your department forward? And I'll ask you the same question in terms of the city.
Yeah, I'm very encouraged by the opportunity the city manager's given me. We're currently working on a strategic action plan where we have several initiatives that we try to accomplish. The fire department is just one department in the city, and so we have competing needs. And so the thing about it is when we go to our biannual budget, preparation and things like that, sometimes we get told no or it has to go back. But understanding how the fire department fits into the larger scale of the city and things like that. So we bring these initiatives. These initiatives are going to be distributed to our members this upcoming week. We want to make sure that we're transparent on how we do it. They understand what the plan is, the things that we want to focus on. And so a lot of the topics that the city manager spoke about are some of the things that we've been able to include in our strategic initiatives. And so I'm super excited. And it's different when you bring these ideas to the leadership, and they say, hey, we might not be able to do it this year, but we might be able to get to it next year. And so that's encouraging, being able to do that long-term planning. And we look forward to it, to continue to work to make sure that we share that with our members and that they understand the direction that we're headed in.
We need to get a gauge of where departments started. And so we've had a climate assessment with the police department, and we had started one with the fire department when Chief McKinley started. When I talk about culture change, people do not trust to give information and for people to do stuff with it. So when we initially started the climate assessment, we had very, very low numbers of participation. People did not want to speak up because they didn't know if they would get in trouble for that. So we had to continue to go back out and survey and find organic ways for people to give us their feedback so that we can utilize that and have enough of enough of voices, capture enough of people voices, diverse voices within the department to figure out what the next steps are. We're finally at that point to be able to do that, but what we are waiting for is a final product, and then Chief is looking into what his recommendations will be. Because what I don't want is for us to say, we've taken time for you all to finally give us input, but this is what we're going to do with it. And so that is the challenge for him. We do not have a final climate assessment yet, but what I want to tell you is that has been never done, and I think in the fire department. And I believe my predecessor has tried to get it done, but it was never able to be completed until Chief McKinley was able to start working on this. And so I think it's very important for people to understand that we have been able to use this as a temperature check and to make sure that we are rowing in the right direction or doing things right. But we wanted to make sure that just as you're any employer, your voices are the ones that tell us what we need to do and what we don't need to do. And it was very important for us to have a really good product of people's voices to be able to deliver that. I am very happy to have a mayor and a council who understands what my role is, and they have given me space to be able to create sustainable systems that allow us to make sure that where city dollars are going is where the taxpayer wanting them to go, and also is communicating what our return on our investment is. And that is huge, because I would argue that prior to that, we did not do that. The vision for the city of Cincinnati deserves the best. We deserve to be on the best foundational footing. The residents deserve to say if they want upward mobility, they can come to our city and they can be able to provide that. And we will continue to provide those resources for them to do that. If you're ready for a change, then we should be able to do that in the city of Cincinnati.
Well, my thanks to the city manager and the fire chief. That does it for the program today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Curtis Fuller. I'll see you next time for another edition of Let's Talk Cincy. Until then, have a good day and a better day tomorrow.